Good evening and welcome back to another live episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast here on the YouTube channel. Coming to you live on Monday evening, reacting to yet another defeat as the Dons hit an unwanted club record of 13 games without victory in the league. Unlucky 13 for some, Phil?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because 13 is my lucky number. Like I've said before, even got it tattooed on me. So it's not great.
No, it's really not, and things on the pitch aren't improving, certainly in the league. We didn't build from that victory over Elgin. So, coming up on the show tonight, we will look back at the unfortunate events that preceded or unfolded, I should say, during the game at the weekend, including, of course, that Slobodan Rubezic performance and what that might mean for his future in the starting lineup. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We'll also look at the transfer window. Of course, that closes on Friday, and certainly after the weekend, it feels like that needs addressed. A few incomings, certainly, but also there's been some talks of some outgoings coming out today, so we'll discuss that before rounding off the episode, looking ahead to the trip to Easter Road, a nice local home game for you for a change.
Not even going to it. That's the worst thing
No.
about it.
Well, there you go. Yeah, so we'll look at all that on the episode, and as always, if you are watching along with us live, remember to like the video, comment your thoughts with us. We've already got a lot of chat going on, so I've started a few comments that we'll come back to. But Phil, I always like to start on the starting lineup, and our form's not settled, but our starting lineup isn't settled either. 5 changes from the victory over Elgin. And I think surprising, certainly for me, I don't know about you, but the entire front three was changed. Was anything else stand out for you in that starting lineup?
Yeah, it was a weird one. Obviously, Dante was a bit of a forced change. Obviously dropping out with injury. I wasn't really too surprised to see Shinnie coming back in. Like I mentioned last week, I think we looked a lot more balanced in that midfield when he did come on against Elgin. But yeah, the front three was a strange one for me. I think especially after the sort of comments made around players that were requiring that sort of boost in confidence and needing the minutes. And even for the likes of Peter Ambrose, okay, maybe not the most finished product we have in the squad, but I thought he looked quite good against Elgin and definitely gave us something up front. So I was quite surprised to see him, Duke, and Morris all dropping out.
Yeah, I want you. You mentioned confidence there, so I'll come to it now. And I had it down for a little bit later on in the show, but since you've mentioned it, we'll talk about it just now. One of the things Jimmy Taline always speaks about is the players needing confidence and to get us out of the run that we're on. But I don't understand then when you get players like Duke and Shaden Morris spoke about that in his pre-match press conference that he needed that confidence, he needed those goals, and also Shaden was the one put up by the club for the pre-match duties, and then he's not even given a start. And I think he was a player that maybe needed that goal against Elgin as well. And I think as much as you mentioned Peter Ambrose, I thought Shaden had a good game. Unlucky not to grab a brace as we discussed on last week's show. I just don't understand the logic behind speaking about players' confidence and then not playing those players. I don't know if this is a go at Jimmy Talina or not, but it feels a bit like double standards.
Potentially in a way. Obviously, we'll come on and speak about it a bit more, but I thought that Yapi Okos had a really good game, which is weird because, again, we spoke about the surprise omission for him in Elgin as a player that could have probably done with the minutes to kind of boost his sharpness and his confidence. But he seemed to come in and have a real positive impact on the game. Keskinen, again, probably unlucky to miss out on the matchday squad entirely in Elgin, so maybe not surprised to see him involved. But yeah, I thought Morris especially has kind of struggled for minutes a lot recently, when we probably have been crying out for his sort of direct nature going forward. So yeah, a very odd one to not include him. And like I say, especially off the back of performance in Elgin, where who knows, we could have maybe seen him get off to a flying start, but obviously it's all sort of what ifs in hindsight now.
Yeah, and I don't understand Topi Keskinen, a player that I don't know if he's struggling to live up to the price tag or if the price tag that was put on him with what we paid in the summer clouding some people's judgment on his performance. He certainly puts in a lot of effort. I still think we see the best out of him on the left-hand side. I know he did play in that role in the second half, but you mentioned Ockles and the comment that I had on screen from Daniel Chapman picked up Alexander Jensen's performance. He said he looks a player, and I think we'll all agree that Jensen has probably looked the pick of the signings from this window so far, and that's not anything on Tobers. It says Ockles was much better than the silver lining from Saturday, but need Tobers to find a partner and start to defend like we did at the start of the season. I understand why people are saying, Ockles was the positive, and Rob McLean addressing that in the post-match interview with Jimmy Talleen as well. But, I mean, yes, he was better, but it feels like we're scraping the barrel if that's what the positives we're looking for, because he hadn't exactly set a high standard to, improve upon, albeit, on another day, the shot that he has in that first half that's spilled is scored by Pape on the rebound. So yes, some shoots of positivity from Ockles, but I felt it was very much a clutching from the weekend, if that's what we're taking out of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, to be fair, from the weekend, I think all we can do is clutch. There wasn't really much else to be totally over the moon about, was there? But no, I think Ockles did everything that you want out of a winger. And really, for me, it was kind of frustrating because that's where we were getting all of our joy, was when Ockles did get his fullback one-on-one and really drove at him, tried to get the ball at the byline or work it into the box, and we just didn't seem to do it enough. I think one of the big frustrations for me from the weekend is we seem to have learned absolutely nothing from the reverse fixture in Paisley. The exact same sort of style where we've forcing these long balls up, which Gogic and Taylor are going to sweep up 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, which is what it felt like on Saturday. And just really sloppy goals that just undid us. Conceding a goal early at St Mirren, they're always going to shut up shop. And we kind of just played into their hands again, which I think is the frustrating thing.
Yeah, and Graham Gibb highlighting that as well. Good to have you along with us, Graham, tonight. When he says Olasanya scored a goal very similar to the goals he scored in the previous 2 games, why are we not learning and adapting? For me, it's actually that last point or last word in that question from Graham, the adapting. And I know a few people have maybe highlighted or does Jimmy Talleen not have a plan B in this instance? And I was helping Callum out for. Well, obviously he's doing his little apprenticeship for the radio just now, and that was kind of one of the questions about, what's going wrong for Jimmy Talleen just now. And I do feel that teams have now learnt how to play us after that first cycle of games, but we've not learnt how to counter the teams that have learnt. And so it's proved the fact that we've pretty much gone a cycle of games without picking up a victory in the league, as many people have said. It feels impossible to do, yet we're achieving those kinds of possibilities. One other thing on the team news that is widely debated was the midfield duo of Shinnie and Nielsen. And I guess, on the back of another defeat and another poor performance, that midfield duo is once again going to come into light. Disappointed to see them both start, obviously, after seeing Palaversa at Elgin.
I don't know if disappointed is the right word. Surprised, perhaps. I maybe expected Palaversa to keep his place. I know that obviously there's a lot of minute management going in to sort of his time here at the club, but conversely, there's got to come a point where he can start 2 games in a row. We can't continually manage his minutes forever, especially now that he's signed a new deal. So would have liked to have seen him get in the midfield, and I think maybe would have helped us get our foot on the ball a bit more. I think there was occasionally too much gaps between not only midfield and defence, but midfield and attack as well. I think he's the sort of the perfect player for linking from back to front. So not disappointed, maybe surprised. I can see why there was a lot of discussion on our bus back with the Fourth Reds guys about how important second balls are in Scottish football, and our sort of failure to be able to basically win the second ball at times, even the first ball. So I can see why he's gone for that sort of more combative midfield against a St Mirren team that were, let's be honest, trying to make the game as slow and gritty as they possibly could. But yeah, I maybe would have liked to have seen Palaversa in there.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty impressive that, Zach Hemming was time wasting pretty much 15, 20 minutes into the game. Well done to Ian, and I know Paul Cool as well, who listens to the podcast. Both had a tenner on him to be booked at 9 to 2, just absolutely printing money there. On that midfield too, Colin Gale, it's always good to have you along, Colin, member here on the YouTube channel, saying there's only room for one of Nielsen and Shinnie, not both. Do you think that's true? And I'm going to maybe come on to that Nielsen point when we speak about Rubezic's kind of performance and what we could have possibly done with Nielsen. But in terms of our midfield, do you think it has to be one or the other and not both going forward?
I think it's an interesting one because I think it's one or the other if you're playing them both holding. I think where we saw a lot of joy early on in the season was having Shinnie higher up. I found they didn't really tread on each other's toes as much as they tend to when they're both sort of sitting as the two sort of anchor men. But then the issue with that is who do you then drop for playing in the 10? When Dante's fit, he looks like he could be a really viable option there.
Yeah.
Clarkson has flashes of looking good in the 10, even potentially as we saw when the subs came later in the game, Pape dropped in to that hole in behind the striker. So it's tough. I think a lot of the times it's really circumstantial who you're playing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, obviously, Leighton Clarkson's a player that's being highlighted about, playing the opposition and was there the need. I do think that Dante injury might come back because I was encouraged by what we saw at Elgin, and I just hope the fact that he's back in a knee brace, despite what Jimmy said pre-match, it's only going to be a few weeks, is that just papering over a few cracks. And as Sam Gordon also pointed out, there's talk this weekend that Nielsen's playing through a groin injury and he is in need of an operation, but he's kind of battling through. I think, as much as what is being made of our drop off in form, there does have to be something said for the amount of injuries that we've got. Obviously, we mentioned Dante Polvara, Jamie McGrath also being confirmed to be out for several months because his shoulder injury is much worse than first feared. Although you do believe it's just him holding off on signing a contract for somebody else. I think this season has been one where we've been plagued. We've not been plagued by like consistent injuries, but it's lengthy injuries to what would be key players and players that would be certainly you would think would be first names on the team sheet when fully fit.
Yeah, I think we're not a club that's blessed with tens of millions of pounds to just go out and basically replace all these players in a heartbeat. Like you said, they're key players to what Jimmy's wanting to do. They're key players within the dressing room. They're really important to the team. And the fact that they're all 6 week, 8 week, few month long injuries that are requiring surgeries or extensive time on the sidelines, it is. I mean, it must be frustrating, for Jimmy as well. It's you almost feel like you can't get any luck really. And I think as well the concern for me has been the fact that a few of them have occurred in training, which is a bit of a worry. Are they getting enough recovery time, or are they getting overworked? It's all sort of trying to get into the mind of it all. But yeah, it has been unfortunate that the injuries we've had have been so severe for the most part.
Yeah, and I think when the injuries have been severe, you look at Mitov's recurrence, Polvara to an extent. I know that was maybe picked up during the game against Elgin, but it feels like the injuries are recurring, and are they as a result of players being rushed back too quickly, and which was my fear when I saw Pape in the starting lineup, that please God hope that he doesn't get injured again. I mean, obviously your other options are Nisbet and Ambrose, not them saying that they were better or worse, but I just think, are we going back to that point from Graham Gibb? I know he was speaking about the opposition, but is the manager learning from some of the mistakes that have been made? And I guess this is a sense of where certain fan frustration is coming in. And I know there is a lot of talk in the comment section. I'm starting as much comments as I can, Phil, to kind of review them and go back. So don't think we are ignoring any of the comments. We will come to them when we can. But I guess the biggest talking point really from the game certainly first 45 minutes, was the performance of Slobodan Rubezic, a player who, has been widely criticised on this podcast. I'll put my hands up and admit to that. A player who has cost us goals in the past, a player who is a bomb scare, I think, to put it lightly. But again, if you want to believe some of the stories that are going about, he has suffered a close bereavement. I think a friend, and has been struggling with that. Now, that might say a lot about Ruby as a character, that despite what is going on in his personal life, still wants to step up and perform for the club. But this goes back to my point. When does then the manager step up and take control of that situation? If there is a player struggling, as admirable as it is for Ruby to maybe suggest the play, when does the manager step in and go, look, Nielsen's played centre back before, we could drop him in. Obviously, Angus MacDonald, clearly not trusted by Jimmy Tillene, and obviously talks about him potentially leaving the club. But is there something that could have been done? Again, this is possibly just hindsight now.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I mean, I think a lot of it's always going to be what ifs. Like you say, I think McDonald, you can pretty much write off his future at Aberdeen, off of sort of what's been occurring in the past few months. Dorrington was an interesting one because I was wholeheartedly expecting to see him in from the start. But then obviously when he came on, he didn't quite look up to it either. I recall him going to clear a ball and immediately grabbing his ankle. So is he then also kind of playing through injury at the same time as well? So it's an interesting one. But yeah, I feel for Ruby because it was just an absolute nightmare. And I think the fact that both of the errors led to goals, it just didn't make it easy for him. But not the best afternoon for him.
Not the best afternoon. The first goal, who are you blaming?
I don't know. At the time, I thought it was more on Doing. But having watched it back, I think it's kind of I think it's a 50-50 really. I think they've both kind of got a little bit of equal blame. I think Doing's miles out when he really doesn't need to be, unless he's adamant he's going to come and just get himself right on the ball and wallop it away. At the same time, Ruby just kind of has to put it anywhere but back to his keeper. I don't know if there was a lack of a shout or God knows what happened, but I think the ball's just got to go anywhere but back towards your goal. Especially, with Olasanya at full pelt already, it's immediately putting the keeper under pressure, even if he is back there to get his foot on the ball. So I think it's sort of on both of them there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the more I watch the goal back, which I don't know why I keep doing, the more the portion of blame for me changes. I think Skoksker saying that Duan needs to do better. Sam Gordon speaking about if he commands his box better, including vocally, the first goal never happens. I think it's an interesting one because we were kind of speaking about that during the game about Ross Duan's communication, and there was another instance where I felt he hesitated to come out. I think it was to deny Olasanya again with a one-on-one, and he seemed to hold and then just spring forward at the ball. And I don't know if that's just the way he's been taught to do it, but it was really an uncomfortable watch at times. And obviously, I've been on here commenting about the way he commands his box from cross balls, but I'll be honest and say at the game, I was fully blaming Rubezic because for me, and from being in the red shed and looking at the way Ross Doohan reacted, I could only sense that there was a shout there from Ross and it felt like Ruby had ignored it. For me, Ruby as well, why he is just heading that straight back, because surely he can see Doohan charging out like a bull in a china shop. But he could have headed that towards the south stand or towards the main stand, away from any danger. He just sets Olasanya up brilliantly. And, it was something that we've discussed about pretty much every time we play St Mirren when Rubezic is involved, and so is Olasanya, that he is going to be targeted with balls over the top and exploiting that pace. And that is what they did. But the more I watch that goal back, I don't even know if Doohan's getting to the ball. He seems so wide of the ball when Ruby heads it. it's honestly, it's so bad. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. But you think, all right, okay, we've made one mistake, and I think we got ourselves a little bit back into the game. Probably unlucky not to score, but when we're conceding poor goals, the one thing you don't want to do is concede two poor goals. And honestly, that second goal was, you could see it coming a mile off. Ruby was painful to watch. And look, if he's going to get beat for pace, like we've discussed, fine. But for me, it's the follow-up effort. It was meek. It was weak trying to push Olasanya out of play. Just take the foul, take the booking. I mean, for Christ's sake, he was happy enough to take a booking against a part-time player from Elgin who was in his head. Why is he not prepared to do that this week? And for me, it's that lack of effort in that second goal, in once he's got beat, that I just couldn't stand. And I just couldn't see any way back into that game from 2-0. At 1-0, I thought, fine, if we can fluke our way back in at 1-1. But I just don't think this team's got enough to come back from 2 goals down to even rescue a point right now. And once again, a team hasn't had to work for 1 goal, let alone 2 now.
Yeah, the second, like you say, the attempted follow up from Ruby was, yeah, no desire in it whatsoever. I think, like Callum was saying, if you're not going to get the ball, at least just kick him into Rosed and make sure the phase of play doesn't go any further. I think for me as well with that goal, it as I've mentioned earlier, just kind of highlighted the horrific gaps we had all afternoon. How is one punted long ball up got St Mirren 2-on-2, fullbacks midfield absolutely nowhere to be seen, and really kind of hung out Tobers and Rubezic to dry there. But yeah, I think even at 1-0, giving St Mirren a 1-0 lead, especially away from home, they're such an organised team. Like we've said, Hemmings was just killing the clock, and probably should have been booked way earlier than what he was for his time wasting. But just chewed up the clock. St Mirren are so organised. They will quite happily, and this is the thing as well, we just never seemed to change. They were quite happy for us to keep on forcing these long balls into channels or up top where, we had no chance of anybody getting on at the end of them, and even didn't have enough bodies to really capitalise on it. But yeah, 2-0, you just kind of felt like a team that was lacking goals already, lacking confidence, lacking any sort of gung-ho about them. It was going to be an uphill battle the whole way. I mean, I think we looked a lot more positive second half, but still, even then, you weren't really feeling like the goal was coming.
No. And after going 1-0 down, I thought we were the better team in terms of chances created. And Paul Donaldson has put it in the chat already. The fact that, if you look at the stats from the game, you'll think, how the hell have Aberdeen lost that 3-0? St Mirren had 3 shots, 3 on target, 26% possession. I was going to say they were clinical, but they didn't even need to be. We were just shocking at the back.
It's the same as we mentioned most weeks for the past however many weeks. We've been recording whilst we've been on this losing run, 13 now, evidently. That majority of the goals are just so weak at our own doing. It is really just a sore one to take, really, because I mean, if St Mirren were having to work hard and scoring all these screamers and well-worked goals, you'd kind of be like, okay, fair enough. But it's just the fact that we seem to be shooting ourselves in the foot every single week.
But I think the hardest thing to take from it is, I mean, there's been some absolutely wild takes on the back of the defeat this weekend, from players to managers, and what this means for, people have got us in a relegation playoff already. And I mean, I understand that given what our form's like, but it just shows the absolute overreaction that comes about on the back of a defeat. We probably spoke about it on the first competitive game at Pittodrie for Jimmy Talleen, when he's appointed, ask the fans for patience. It's going to be a 3-year project. We need to give him time. Half time in his first game at Pittodrie, booed off. Speaking of booing, that takes us back to Pittodrie on Saturday. Sam Gordon saying booing your own players at home on the ball is unacceptable regardless of circumstance. He had a howler. He can't sub himself off. We'll come on to that. It helps nobody and must make you feel like utter dog shite. Where do you stand on people booing Rubezic? Because honestly, it felt like a carbon copy of Shaden Morris's cameo. I think that's one way of describing it, against Motherwell when Neil Warnock hooked him before halftime.
Yeah, look, there's absolutely no doubts that Rubezic was gash. I don't think anyone can deny it. I was frustrated at Rubezic, but I think booing one of your own players on his first touch of the ball after going 2-0 down, and it wasn't just a minority, it felt like it was a blooming heap, at least in the South Stand anyway. It felt like it was a lot, is just absolutely ridiculous. I don't understand it. Like, I get it. You've paid your money to go. He's had a howler. We're on a horrific streak and emotions are high, but just give your head a wobble. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Look, I know, Focal, as you said, we've said before, you pay your money, you're justified with your opinion, but I almost had to double take. I was like, who's being booed here? And I looked up and Rubezic was on the ball, and I was like, what is going on? Like, and that's what I'm saying, like, going back to this whole fans need to give the manager and team patience, and it's like half an hour into a game in the middle of January and the patience is fully gone. Obviously I know the winless run is not helping in the league, and neither is poor individual performances, but it clearly went straight to Ruby's head. And I think, I think obviously the way it looked, because unless you were in the main stand or extremely observant, probably in the south stand, wouldn't have seen Ruby signalling to be subbed off straight after the second goal before proceeding to run straight down the tunnel, which probably doesn't help matters when you've had an absolute shocking first half hour. I'm struggling on this one because I don't know if Jimmy Tilleen was just absolutely raging or was just in a complete daze by what he'd seen. I just wonder if Jimmy Tilleen could have protected Rubezic a little bit better in the situation, in the sense that, as I've mentioned, if he was struggling mentally pre-match, as admirable as it is that he wants to play and try and help us end this run, don't play him. We've got Nielsen there. But some of his comments after the game, I don't feel has necessarily helped Rubezic, and people will be like, "Oh, Glenn's standing up for Rubezic here," but purely on the fact that he's come out and said, "Well, I don't know why he asked to be subbed." Just make it up. Just say he's pulled his hamstring or something. He felt a twinge. He couldn't continue. Just defend your player in that situation. And, like I said, especially when kind of a couple of stories have come out that, maybe he is struggling with things outside of football. I just wondered if that could have been handled a little bit better by the manager. But, as I said, I think he was probably as stunned as most of the rest of us were. And, it's not easy, I'm sure, when a camera and microphone are chucked in your face on the back of yet another disappointing result. But I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's like you're saying, it's the ambiguity that people can't really deal with, and it obviously then just causes speculation. Like we said so much in this episode, it's all a case of what ifs. And as we've sort of seen, social media can be rife with those one way or the other. And I think as well, it's equally as a high emotions and high stakes game for Jimmy. And to be asked daft questions by Rob McLean following a 13th, winless game in the league. You probably are a little bit flustered. Your head's not really there. A lot of his comments about trying to find solutions, and I like to think that's the sort of man Jimmy is. He's always looking ahead and trying to figure out how he can get better and how the team can get better. He probably just didn't have wasn't sort of there emotionally, wasn't there mentally enough to sort of, like you say, try and protect Rubezic a little bit more and give him that sort of shielding from a trial by social media. But yeah, it's all what ifs. a lot of talk about this potentially being Rubezic's last game in a Dons jersey. Um, I really do hope not, as much as he has been a bomb scare for big parts. Um, I do think that there is a player in there somewhere, and I don't think his passion can really be denied. He's one of the players that always looks up for it. And like you say, I think um, if he has been struggling mentally pre-match and is going through something personal, to sort of put your hand up and say, no, but I want to play and I want to, try and dig the team out of this hole, um, I think is kind of testament to how much he really does kind of care about the cause and the club.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to speak about players that show passion, I'm just going to divert straight on to the next point then. And that takes me to the leadership in this team, because players that show passion and it maybe doesn't translate onto the pitch takes me to our captain. Um, Neil Warnock, as you've mentioned on here, his comments about the club lacks leaders and leadership. Again, this is something that Jimmy Tillene is keen to identify in and bring in, and obviously was hoping in with the likes of Christers Tobers, I guess to an extent in Nielsen as well. But as much as fans are directing questions towards Jimmy Tillene, and look, for me, I'm still sticking with Jimmy Tillene. There's a point that I want to bring up after this discussion that we'll come on to. When is it that fans start questioning the players? When is it acceptable for the players to come under criticism? Because this is largely the same group of players that we had under Barry Robson, that we had under Peter Leven, and Peter Leven got a tune out of most of these players, let's not remember. And Neil Warnock, similarly, Jim Goodwin. So when do these players become accountable? And I think it's hugely ironic that Graham Shinnie has come out in the press today and saying, that the upcoming few weeks will lead to Jimmy Tillene knowing which of his players have the character when things are going wrong. Why are we finding out in the coming weeks? What's happened for the last 2 months? Why does it need to take us to go 13 league games without a win to finally discover the character of this team, Graham? He's supposed to be the captain. Just because he thumps his chest and shows a bit of passion every now and again, and obviously, you're in the south stand, vice captain mouthing off to the south stand as well. It's just not a good look for certain individuals at the club just now. And people are obviously going to direct their feelings towards the manager because he's the one that picks the team, but he's picking what he thinks is the best team to go out and get a result. The players have to do that. And for me, right now, I feel that some members of this squad are letting the manager down. But, you could argue as well, maybe he needs to learn to drop a few of those players.
Yeah, I think it's trying to find that sort of balance in a way. I think Jimmy's maybe got to be a little bit potentially firmer, but also maybe potentially swallow his pride a little bit. So much of this run, Nielsen's really been off the boil, but seems to remain. Shinnie as well will maybe have a good game when he's been dropped for a few games, but then as soon as he's in for 2 or 3 games in a week, his standards drop as well. And it's a real tough one. It was something I was discussing coming back down the road. Where not only do they need to kind of hold themselves a little bit accountable, I think as senior, leaders within the team, I think they've also got to stand up as well, especially, like say, likes of Shinnie and Devlin, who've been around Scottish football long enough, need to sort of stand up and say this isn't working and make the changes on the fly. I mean, I'm refusing to believe that Graham Shinnie, who's played St Mirren God knows how many times in his career, who have played pretty much the same way every single time, wouldn't be turning around and going, drop 10 yards deeper, make the gaps a little bit smaller, and let's stop trying to punt it over the top of them because it's not working. I think there's got to be that aspect where you kind of change it on the fly and kind of, in a way, go above the manager's head at some point.
Yeah, and I think, that's fair. And I'm looking at some of the comments that are coming in as well. And Simon Stannard saying Jimmy has to get the whole season. And I agree. I think he will as well. There's been too much investment already this window for him not to get the whole season. And I think, it feels quite interesting doing this live on Monday night when Stuart Kettlewell has resigned as Motherwell manager after citing the abuse that his family or he's been receiving and how that's affecting his family. And it kind of hits home after seeing, as I said, some of the takes on social media this weekend from an Aberdeen support that kind of turns quicker than milk right now. And I saw, I think it was Skokesker said that, the start to this season turned a lot of our fans, into entitled pricks, I think, to quote him on that. And I maintain that the start that Jimmy Tilleen had for us did raise expectation. And for those that maybe watched the pre-match build up to the Rangers Dundee United game yesterday, will have seen kind of Chris Sutton's comments, and I couldn't believe myself sitting there like agreeing with what Chris Sutton had said, in the sense that we had built up that expectation, we had a solid start, but it's the drop off which is causing this outrage and this disbelief. But if you said to us that at the end of last season, at the end of January, you'll be sitting 1 point off a third and sitting fourth in the table, we'd have all snapped your hand off. What is unbelievable is the fact that everybody else is almost failing to capitalize on how poor we've been and how far ahead we were. It feels unacceptable that we've dropped into arguably a battle just to stay in the top six.
Yeah, it's a weird one because, like I say, I think what's really clouding a lot of it is the fact that this spell has came all at once. I think we spoke about it weeks gone by. I think it was off the back of one of Colin's comments, about the fact that if we had these losses scattered in and amongst our winning streak,
yeah,
I don't think anyone would have really cared. I think it's the fact that it's all came in such a big clump that heads have kind of gone a little bit, and I think it is just because we got so used to riding that wave. I mean, God, how many weeks did me and Callum come on here as optimistic as we've ever been, thinking that we were going to go and win the treble? But um, at the core of it, it's the same group of players that went on that run. I think that's why the drop off is kind of mind boggling in a way, because nothing really seems to have changed. The system's somewhat the same, the formation's the same, the players for the most part are the same. So I think that's what's kind of making it difficult. So I was trying to marry up where that issue's gone wrong, because it's really kind of hard to pinpoint how and why the wheels have sort of fallen off as drastically as they have. And I think as well, it's the sort of parallels it's had to the past few seasons. It's the same time, every single year that we just seem to entirely capitulate, and it doesn't quite make a lot of sense, at least to me anyway.
Yeah, and it is, as Sam Gordon says, the best run in the league followed by the worst run in the league is just peak Aberdeen. And I think, Forbes McFarlane also summing up very well. I love being an Aberdeen supporter. The drama of this team is a TV show. The highs, 4 months of this season, and the lows. But this is just Aberdeen. It's hard, but it's how it will always be. And Neve said that as well. It's about the fact that the lows are going to be low, but that's why we enjoy the highs so much, and it's part of the roller coaster of being a football fan. But one point that I saw on Twitter at the weekend, and I wanted to bring it up, comes from the account Red Point of View, at Red POV, for those of you on Twitter and X, as some people still weirdly call it. I'm just going to read out this thread because I think it contains some really good points in here. And the first one that I bookmarked is quite key, because I think this is a bit of debate amongst Aberdeen fans just now. It says, Thielen, in my opinion, is still the right man and convinced he will get it right. Longer term, but at the moment, it's not good enough. These two opinions can coexist. We just need to get to the end of the season, hopefully in a European spot. There's a core of players there who are not good enough, not up for the fight, or wanting out the door. Our main signings this season have now either played too much football over the last calendar year or not enough. Add in a swathe of injuries and it's not a good mix. We can't keep chopping and changing managers and need to stick with Thielen to see what he delivers us long term. His trademark is building teams up to stability over a period of years, not months. Granted, this run of form is unacceptable, but Thielen is also learning as well. After a blistering start, we now find ourselves back amongst the fight for the top six. Unforgivable given the start, but probably where we expected to be at the start of the season. Need to see some shoots of spring soon for some reinvigorated hope. I think that is a real kind of excellent summarization from probably how most of us are feeling from that account.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to Jimmy's post match as well, you can tell that he knows that it's not been good enough. And I think the fact that he doesn't shy away from the criticism is important because he's not immune to it by any stretch of the imagination. I think we've spoken about this before. You can be entirely for Jimmy, like us, and I feel like the majority of the fan base are, um, and also give him his fair due of criticism. Like
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm going to keep on coming back to the fact coming down the road. So much of the conversation was, it's not Jimmy out. It's Jimmy just needs to get it right, basically, and again, kind of swallow his pride a little bit and change it up. But also at the same time, the fact that he is sticking with it and it has got a proven track record of working is a positive in a way. The fact that he's not going to back down from that. But I think the fact that he used the term solutions, I think was quite nice because I think that's the main thing. We need solutions. He needs to go back to that sort of very proactive approach to his substitutions, to the changing of the shape, or different how we're going to sort of press teams. I think is really key. And also, I think what was interesting on the back of it as well was the fact that he used the term exposed. And when he was saying we've been exposed by Motherwell, Ross County, and St Mirren, because he's exactly spot on. Teams have found our weaknesses and they play entirely into it, and
Yeah.
we just don't seem to have a way to counter that. And I think as much as that's on the players, because I think a lot of us getting exposed comes down to a sort of lack of fight at times. I think it's equally, as much on Jimmy to make sure that we are back to that structure and that organisation that we were so successful with at the start of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's what I took from kind of listening to him when I felt he was maybe a bit dismissive of Ockle's performance in his Red TV interview. But that's because in that moment, he obviously couldn't focus on the positives because yet it was another defeat. And he wanted to, or he knew that there was more work to be done than just one individual player having a good game. There's mistakes being made, the same sort of mistakes being made. We're not good enough in the final third. We're not consistent enough in the final third. And we're not good enough at the back either. So, if we keep conceding sloppy goals and we're not scoring goals, then we are in big trouble. And obviously, we've now only got 5 days to sort that as well before the transfer window shuts close. I mean, we could sit here and speak about the creativity, which I've put in the notes, but I feel we're just regurgitating the same nonsense. So what I would like to do is actually come on to some of the comments that have come in because it has been a very proactive show tonight. There is, we're into 3 figures of people watching. So thank you very much for the support on the show tonight. Do remember to hit like and continue to put in your comments and thoughts on the show as well. Paul Donaldson put this comment in before we even started the show tonight. Said if the current form continues, the calls for Jimmy to be sacked will increase. The board need to hold their nerve and stick with him. Sacking managers every season in January, February is not sustainable. I think we've kind of probably a little bit addressed this. I just don't see where the board sack the manager at this stage, given the backing we've seen in the window already and the consistency in the message about the project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Stephen McPhee had popped in earlier about the revolving door,
Yeah.
which is just it's something we need to try and nip in the bud. Um, the one thing that the higher ups at the club are wanting, what all of us as fans are wanting, is stability to return to the club.
Hmm.
And I think as soon as we sort of throw the toys out the pram at a winless run with Jimmy and start calling for his head, it's not going to do anyone favors. It's not going to do the players favors. It's not going to do us favors as fans because, like I say, how long have we called for something different than your, Derek Adams and Neil Lennon's and whatever
Mm.
shite the day we've been getting linked with when we were without a manager. Um, so we really need to kind of stick with it and make it work. I
Mm.
think as much of that's on us as well as on the pitch and in the dugout.
Yeah, Colin Gale also commenting before we came live as well about the need for a settled team. The numerous changes every game is not helping us. That's something that we've spoken about in our group chat, and I know we spoke about in the pub before the Elgin game as well. Seeing 5 changes once again, and this is for me why I don't understand the change to the front 3 at the weekend. I felt it was a very bold move given the confidence that both Duke and Morris would have taken into the game. If it paid off, look, you'd be saying fair play, good decision. And this was probably a decision that in August and September would have turned to gold for Jimmy Tillene, but right now everything is not turning to gold. And when you change your front 3 and we still don't score, it rightly draws question marks.
Yeah, and again, I think it just comes back to that whole point of having that sort of stability. I think if you can nail down an 11 that can play majority of weeks with as little changes as possible. I know a lot of them have been out with his control. All the better it would be for the team just to have that sort of, again, just have that structure back.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another point that Colin has made as well, but I'm going to save that for when we come on to the transfer talk in a second. Daniel Chapman saying he understands the form's dropped off a cliff, but if you offered him where we are now at the start of the season, I'd have bit the hand off. We need to try something different. Not sure what though. Again, we've already covered that about, in that thread from a Red point of view as well, about kind of offering us where we were. I guess when he talks about something different, it takes me on to the comment that James Tasker put in just as we came live. Joey Harper wrote in his weekly column in the EE, he says that we need to play 2 up front, just change our shape. Folk know how we play. We've become predictable. Again, there's been calls for this over, I guess, the weekend, and I think Graham Gibbs also put that in the comment section as well tonight about, we don't seem to have a plan B, and I think he also said we're putting squares into round holes. I've mentioned Topi Keskinen on the right hand side. It does Jimmy, again, I go back to what he said in his post-match interview, that he's going to go away and sit down with the staff and review everything and see what needs done. Does he almost need to suck up and change formation and just to win ugly, as we've kind of already said over the last couple of months?
Yeah, and like I've even said this episode, I think there has got to be an element of potentially swallowing his pride a little bit. As earlier mentioned, Scottish football so much about. I think that's maybe where we'd struggle with a 2 up top. St Mirren were actually all Asanya who and Nickel in front of goal. They've got who's a really great outball, really strong, tall target forward. So that works really well. And I feel like we just don't quite really have the personnel to really go with a 2 up top. As much as it pains me to say it, I think the way that Jim Goodwin's got United kind of organised in that sort of 4-3-3 has been working quite well. I feel like they've got a lot of similar sort of personnel to what we have, especially on the top end of the pitch. So whether we go to a sort of more out and out 4-3-3 instead of a sort of 4-5-1, as it sort of seems like we tend to play, whether that would work better. Again, this is coming from a man who doesn't even have a UEFA Z license, let alone an A. So do not take anything I say as gospel, as I say every week, because every so often I get someone come up to me and act like I'm some sort of footballing messiah, when my opinion means as much as anyone else's, really.
I know, we only pretend to be in the know. We're never actually in the know, much to unpopular belief. But hopefully everyone managed to catch most of what you said, because I think you did buffer a little bit. You were like Ruby trying to run back against Olasanya.
Probably for the best when I'm speaking, to be honest.
A couple of other comments coming in. Ashbrook House saying this cannot be one thing, but is it more the players who overperformed than becoming shite overnight? Or did Jimmy just get lucky for a few months, but is actually shite? It could be that the players were overperforming, because again, as much as I said that, the players need to step up and take accountability and responsibility for what happened, Jimmy was getting a tune out with him for the first couple of months. I don't think Jimmy is shite. I think, I think teams have just quickly managed to work out how to play against us. I think Sam makes another good point here. We just have little to no patience in Scottish football. That's the real problem here. And I think more so up here in the Northeast, we very much have little patience, do we, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's the cold air and lack of sun makes us all very cynical.
So yeah, look, as I said, a wide variety of comments coming in, and I know the debate is continuing to rage on in the comments off the back of what we've just spoken about. So it really is just kind of good to see lots of discussion coming in. And I guess on one of the points about the changing formations, Roy Thompson asks, don't know how changing formation changes bad goalkeeping and high number of individual errors and not having a striker that finishes chances. It's quite a fair point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, let's go on then to the transfer window. We've got, as I said, 5 days. It closes on Friday night. Unless they're doing all this nonsense when it closes on Saturday morning. Who knows? Everything seems to change these days. In terms of incomings, things are a little bit quiet on that front just now. So we'll speak about the only news that we've got just now, where Jimmy McGarry looks set to leave the club on loan to Greek side Calathea. Thoughts on this one? I can't say I'm overly impressed that he might be leaving the club in this window.
Yeah, it's a strange one, and I kind of feel a little bit sorry for him in a way, if that's the right term to use. Because I actually, potentially an unpopular opinion, I think he's been quite good when he's played. In all honesty, I think he's potentially, obviously, we've not really seen him in action since his injury, but potentially let that flame under Jack McKenzie's backside a little bit. Because I always find it convenient that he seems to return to a matchday spot as soon as McGarry puts in a good shift. So yeah, a little bit disappointed. I think obviously Jensen's looking to nail down that left back spot. I would have liked to have kept McGarry around. I think Jensen's versatile enough to go into midfield. That having that extra cover at left back, is helpful for us, especially the fact that McKenzie has had a couple of injury setbacks already this season and doesn't look set to be signing a new deal. So bit gutted for McGarry, a bit of a strange one.
Yeah, Paul Donaldson. I knew someone would keep me right. Paul Donaldson saying that the deadline day is Monday at 11 o'clock. So, if we're doing an episode next Monday, we might actually do that. Might come and do a live next Monday on transfer deadline day. I'll look at the yellow tie especially.
Yeah, I'll need to make sure I've got Akan in our Four Threads group chat giving me all the latest rumours that he seems to pluck and put in.
Oh Christ! Well, I'll get on to Alan Burrows and get that Richard Coney rumor on the go before.
Well, that's
before
dead in the water. Luton's putting a £6 million bid, so unless we're breaking the bank, that's my transfer guru days are done.
Where's that Boyan money going? Yeah, no. Back to Jimmy McGarry. I think I'm disappointed as we had that message on from Colin about, he was concerned seeing the reports of him moving on, especially after the weekend with Rubezic's performance. Dorrington, you mentioned, and I saw it as well when he went to kind of hold his ankle after turning very innocuously with the ball. I don't know if he was maybe kind of going into the game with a little bit of a knock and a niggle, but the only thing I would say to Colin on that is both Rubezic and Dorrington are centre backs, where Jimmy McGarry absolutely isn't. So if you have any concerns about that, can't even say it with a straight face, would be the impending departure of Angus MacDonald. But it just shows how thin on the ground we are in that area now. Because I guess question marks, when we come on to the Hibs game, will be asked about, does Ruby start that game? In terms of incomings, we've not seen anything concrete in terms of rumours. The only kind of inward chat seems to be for Lyle Cameron, the Dons trying to hijack for a bit of clickbait there, the deal that Rangers are trying to construct for him and sell. For me, that's an attractive proposition. Especially with the long-term injury to Jamie McGrath for the rest of this season and the likelihood that he is going to leave the club in the summer, and also kind of the inconsistency in Leighton Clarkson's performance. I know that Willie McPherson would actually just like us to pay 2 million and take Lyle Cameron and Josh Mulligan and Finlay Robertson from Dundee and invest some youth talent from Scotland. But I guess on that is going back to a point we mentioned last week. If you want to look at that left back area, the centre backs coming into the weekend's game, where are these academy prospects coming through now without getting accused of plagiarism and looking at players out on loan? But we saw, Alfie Babbage has started well at Inverness, Alfie Stewart scoring, Dylan Lobban performing well, Adam Emsley, Fraser Mackey scoring for Fraserburgh as well. So, some of our youth players are getting out and getting minutes. When do these players even get the opportunity to be integrated into the first team?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, even on top of that as well, Finlay Marshall getting a goal for Cove the other
Yeah.
day as well, who's a player that I know around the managers in the lower leagues, they all really think he's one of the best prospects we've got.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is important. I think even more kind of confusing at times as well is the fact that there was such a big deal made about Fletcher Boyd getting a new, was it a 3-year deal, I think?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was announced whilst we were in Germany, actually,
Yeah.
to 2027 and being included in matchday squads, but not seeming to get a sniff at all, which, we've spoken about before. You don't really want to throw him in when we're on this bad run and things aren't clicking anyway, but also, conversely, things have been so bad right now, and we have been speaking about change and switching things up that would somebody like that coming in again, that unknown quantity, players maybe aren't really going to know how best to play against him because he's only had the 2 games in the league. So it'd be interesting to see him get some minutes again. Surprised
Yeah.
he maybe never played against Elgin. But yeah, there's got to be the opportunity somewhere, and I've said it before, it's a league wide issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just an Aberdeen issue, but for how good our youth level teams have been um, over the past couple of years, the fact there doesn't seem to be that clear a pathway that we were so sort of loud about
Yeah, exactly.
previously. That pathway seems to have now disappeared. It is a little bit of a concern, I think. Obviously, as we've said as well, the fact we could be playing European football next season, um, we need to have those homegrown players within the squad, and they might need to be called upon. So if they can get minutes under the belt, all the better.
Yeah, and look, I've spoken to Neil Simpson about this before, about the players going out on loan, and he thinks these players benefit for coming up against kind of the experienced pros and not exactly getting kicked about every week, but you learn more than playing the same players your age group. I know there's obviously talk about the reserve league, coming back and stuff like that. But you just need to look at Rangers scrapping their B team, probably a cost saving exercise knowing them. But you also look at our own players. We've got Timothy Akindelaney. He's attracting interest from QPR, Rangers as well, also sniffing around. We've not seen him in and around the first team. I think he warmed up with them for a couple of games, but not made the bench. If teams from the English Championship are sniffing around him, when does he become good enough to feature, especially right now, when we have a bit of an issue at centre back? But as shown on screen, there was a couple of comments about playing some of these youngsters in what's been described by a few of you as a poisonous atmosphere with the booing that we saw at Pittodrie on Saturday. When do these players get those first team chances?
It's really hard to say. I mean, just now you don't want to really, as I said, you don't want to really throw them in when it's like this. If Ruby's getting booed for 2 howlers, I don't know what it's going to be like if we throw in this unknown 17-year-old that might have a howler. But something's somewhat got to give. There's definitely players that could fill holes where we have been struggling, and where we probably could do with a little bit of extra bodies to cover for the positions. Um, and it's sort of, we're running out of time where games maybe aren't as high cast as they are
Mm.
now. games seem to have a lot more meaning and be a lot more high stakes than they were whilst we were on the winning run. I still don't quite understand why during games, if we were a couple goals up, we didn't chuck somebody on.
Yeah.
Whilst spirits were high, it kind of becomes difficult to justify it now. But it's got to come at some point because it's going to bite us the longer it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So as much as talking about that pathway, there's obviously still a greater need to bolster our squad between now and Monday, as Paul's kept us right with. What would be your urgent needs and wants between now and next week?
For me personally, I think a striker's the be all and end all. The likelihood that Nisbet could still be recalled, leaving us short with just Ambrose and Gay, who, in my opinion, is not a number 9. I think we kind of saw that on Saturday. Um, I think an out and out clinical 9 is something that we really, really need.
Yeah, but as much as a clinical number 9 is needed, what I'm going to say. You need someone to be creating those chances for him. Do we still need a creative player?
Most likely, I think on the wings, it's there. It just kind of needs to sharpen up again. I think Ockles looked good on Saturday and kind of showed flashes of him being a creative outlet. Keskinen as well. Obviously can provide and finish as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I suppose that the 10 you're maybe looking at McGraw
Yeah,
injured, Clarkson kind of inconsistent in how he's performing. Um, so a 10 would be good. Lyle Cameron potentially, like we said, from what I think I read, and I think it was maybe the record, they're just kind of looking for effectively what we got for Barron's around about that sort of 600,000 mark, which I don't think is a bad investment really, and someone who definitely improved the side.
yeah. I think the biggest kind of issue that we've got between now and next week is it's a position that is going to be in demand for a few clubs, and unless we're prepared to pay a premium, is that deal going to be right for the club between now and the end of the window? And do we just have to accept we're going to have to put up with what we've got between now and the end of the season? Given Magary's impending departure, a few people have also suggested that Alexander Jensen could go over to right back to now allow Nicky Devlin a rest, because I think it's certainly looking like performances are catching up with him. Is there? I'm not going to say a need for a defender, but more so a fullback, another one, or that's kind of low down on the priority between now and next week.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the form we're on makes nothing a low priority at the moment. I think everyone's buying for some changes to the squad and see some new faces in just to give us that little bit of excitement back. But no, I think you're right with potentially if Jensen's not going over to cover for Nicky, maybe a right back coming in, obviously with Milne still being out injured, potentially looking at someone coming in there again. If we could get somebody of the ilk of Jensen who can kind of cover multiple positions and is quite a versatile player. Potentially Jimmy looks down that route to kind of maximize the money he's spending.
Yeah, and I think again, it's difficult to maximize the money that you're going to be spending in the January transfer window, and this is why I think people are going to start commenting about younger players or recalling players from loan to fill the needs. But I think this is going to be it's going to be an interesting week for the club. I said for the fans' voice piece on the BBC that it feels like a crucial week off the pitch in terms of recruitment, and obviously we've seen talk of possible exits, but on the pitch because this run needs to end, and it needs to end really this weekend against Hibs. And as Callum said, you spoke about the St Mirren game being full circle. Callum said that he would like this information included on the podcast, that he feels it would be quite fitting, or he's just maybe channeling his inner football romantic, that in the game that was the sliding door moment for both clubs' seasons, that we restart our season with a win at Easter Road.
Yeah, no, it would be ideal. It's it's a home fixture, I suppose, for me. Like I say, although I'm not going,
Yeah.
there's nothing I enjoy more than seeing us beat the Edinburgh teams. I know that, as I've mentioned them before, the fourth red slot will be there in force, and there's nothing they want more than for us to beat the Edinburgh teams because let me tell you, it's painful coming back down on a bus after watching us lose. It's a rather quiet bus compared to the start of the season. Even if the likes of Shades and Co are still being as noisy and boozy as ever and missing their trains, but yeah, I'm hoping that we can just turn it around because the way that we kind of dropped the points in the reverse fixture was absolutely heartbreaking. So I
Mhm.
feel it's only right that we get back on the horse with a good drubbing of Hibs at Easter Road.
Yeah, and of course the game being on Saturday. So for those driving down and maybe listening to us on the way down, enjoy that traffic once you hit Dunfermline because of course the egg chasing starts this weekend. Although that's a 2 o'clock kickoff at Murrayfield, so
Yeah, that's what I'll be in attendance at, Glenn. I was trying to leave it off as long as possible so I didn't get Tory shouts from everybody, but I will be at the egg chasing over Hibs.
oh
Apologies.
yeah, you got your flares and brown shoes looked out, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll have
Um,
it on the phone on the dodgy stream. Don't worry, you get good signal at Murrayfield.
right, we saw 5 changes for the game against St Mirren. How many changes are you expecting this weekend?
Oh God, if you got a tombola, we can just pull one out. 'Cause I think it's
Well,
I
I
think
mean
it's anyone's guess at this point.
that would be some real kind of tribute to Jimmy Calderwood. Obviously, we had the minutes applause, and we've got the upcoming kind of tributes that are going to be coming at the cup game. But getting the tombola dusted off would be a real throwback.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I mean, I think Kevin made a good account of himself against St Mirren, but obviously previously didn't really do much for me against Hibs. Um, Defensively, you're probably up in the air again as well. It is really really tough to say.
If
Um,
you're Jimmy Tillina, are you starting Slobodan Rubezic this weekend?
you might be left with no option to start him. I don't think it's probably right to
That's
start
what
him
I
because
feel.
it'll
Yeah.
be absolute. I do not want to know what the groans and moans would be like when that team sheet comes out and people see him start. And I also don't want to see what it'd be like when he gets on the ball or if he does make any sort of slight error. Um, and again, I think it's not necessarily throwing him under the bus
Mhm.
if he starts him, but um, yeah, it would be tough. It would be really, really tough for him. And I think maybe giving him that period away, like we said, if he is struggling with something personal, um, maybe giving him that little bit of time away to come back and refine the form that he did have at the start of the season, um, would be ideal. But then it is sort of who then fills that gap.
Yeah, I guess you've obviously got Dorrington to fill that gap. Obviously, again, question marks over his fitness at the moment, given what we saw with his ankle at the weekend. We've seen Nilsson have the ability. Yeah, I think that's going to be fair to him. Yeah, the ability to drop in at centre back as well. But again, the question marks would be if Dorrington's on the bench, could you at least play him? And then, of course, Tober's played 90 minutes at the weekend, and he's a player whose minutes are supposed to be getting managed just now. Although I would like to think, currently, right now, with a week in between games, that should be more than acceptable for a professional football player. It's just the defense that does concern me, and I just wonder again if Jack McKenzie's fit and available. Do you look at moving Jensen over to the right and giving Devlin that rest, or is he another player whose name's first on the team sheet? But given how much the front three didn't work, as good as Ockles was, Keskinen frustrated. Yes, Pape was an outball. Do we see changes up there? It just, I think you really hit the nail on the head. It does feel like a tombola right now, um, because I actually remember seeing the tweet that the club put out saying predict the starting 11, and you'll win a signed shirt. I think anyone that predicts a Jimmy Tilleen starting 11 right now deserves a lot more than a signed shirt.
Yeah, it's again, much like some of the luck we maybe rode at the start of the season, I think it is pure pot luck to nail on an Aberdeen starting 11 this season. I don't think I've got one right whenever I've put into the group chat or spoke to you in the pub before a game. I'm always at least two or three people out minimum.
Mm.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we go on Saturday.
In terms of we've discussed it already on the show, the change in style. Do you think he does that this weekend?
Potentially, I mean, I feel like Hibs will kind of go to the game the same way as they did last time around, try and really press us high and use their sort of pace in the top end of the pitch to really try and punish us. So I think it is kind of important we do everything we can to nullify that. Whether it is a change of shape or slight tactical changes, will be interesting to see. Again, with the current assets, it's kind of hard to see how we change that shape in a big way that's going to
Mhm.
really bring us notable changes. Um, yeah, again, it's just it's interesting. We can go back and forth about what we think and what we would like to happen. And again, like I said, I think it's entire potluck. Jimmy's mind works in
Yeah.
wonderful ways, and I think that's why he will end up being a good coach for us. The fact that he is a little bit different to the norm.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the weekend's game and how St Mirren exploited the well their assets in terms of Olasanya and using the pace in behind, what concerns me with the gaps that you alluded to in the game, we've not even spoken about the third goal from the St Mirren game and how easy one ball over the top split apart our defence. Hibs will look to exploit that with Dwight Gale and Martin Boyle, and then you've got the Cadden twins on the wings as well, who caused us no end of problems last time out at Easter Road, and to an extent at Pataudry as well. So that kind of causes me a bit of concern ahead of the weekend. But I wonder how much you know this game is about confidence going into it, because well, we're low on confidence, I'm sure, as fans and players alike. But Hibs, had a strange game. Looked to be in control against Ross County, a dodgy penalty in the first half, well saved, and then another kind of controversial penalty at the end of the game, denying them the win. So people speak about how the concession of late goals may affect teams into the following week. It'll be interesting to see what kind of reaction David Gray gets from his players, or how they let that decision affect them slash motivate them.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, there's no doubt about that. They're going to have to utilize it one way or another, and I think as well the fact that the gap's a lot closer now than it was the first time I went to Easter Road will probably give them a lot more confidence as well. So,
Mhm.
like you say, it's lined up perfectly to hopefully be that turning point game for us. I feel like unlike last time, we're going into this miles off favourites. I think most people will have us marked down as the underdog. I'll be interested to see the sort of bookies odds in the lead up to Saturday, as to what they've got us priced at. So I'm hoping the stars are aligning, and we'll be back to winning ways. But I feel like I said the same thing right before we went on this losing run, and I've said the same thing every week since. So maybe I should just say we're gonna have a boring 0-0 and we'll win. Who knows? Reverse psychology.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the odds just now. Gamble responsibly, of course.
We don't have
Feel
an
like I have.
affiliate link for anyone either, sadly, so you're not getting free money.
Yeah, I know. Use the code RTG free bet and get nothing back. um, yeah, Hibs 5 to 6 odds on favourites, and Aberdeen are at 29 to 10, so nearly 3 to 1. That's with Sky Bet. So yeah, clearly massive underdogs going into this game. I think it just kind of shows you where we are in terms of our performance, and also how well, I guess how the money's going for this game. Jimmy Tulline, as I said, wants to focus on improving. I can't even say it with a straight face and without laughing, because it's, I mean, from what we saw against St Mirren, it's pretty easy to improve. Just cut out the simple mistakes. Look like you can be a bit composed in possession. It really feels like it shouldn't be fucking hard, but boy, are we making it hard for ourselves right now. I think even just seeing a few signs of that would, for me, be considered improvement this weekend.
Yeah, like I keep on saying, the only way is up. The only way is up. I'm gonna try and be as positive as I can because I don't think but I mean I've been negative enough this season. I don't think it's kind of helped. So Yeah, believe, make Aberdeen great again, folks.
Okay, we'll leave it on that then. One final thing then before we wrap up, because I know we've been chatting for a while now, and as I said, it's been great to see so much interaction on the podcast tonight. The pricing has been announced for that cup game against Dunfermline, and a lot of kind of talk on the back of it. Adult prices are at £24 for the game, and the club announcing that £1 from every ticket sold will go to Alzheimer's Scotland, of course. That charity linked closely to Jimmy Calderwood. I think that's a very classy touch from both clubs. Pricing on that's been a controversial issue. It seems a lot of people unhappy with the £24. For me, I was saying to Keith, £23 and then putting the pound to Alzheimer's Scotland. Any thoughts on that being overpriced, given it's a Sunday 12:30 live on TV?
No, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I think everyone would have liked cheaper ticket pricing to try and entice more people into the stadiums. I think a Sunday 12:30, you're struggling to get bodies into the ground anyway, let alone after this run, be an even harder sell. But obviously, both teams have to agree on it. There'll be a sort of league minimum as well, or well, an SFA minimum that they've probably got to adhere to as well. So, nothing really, I would say, is too bad. I mean, considering you go to away games. I mean, even Dundee away, I'm pretty sure is up to £30 now. So, I don't think £24 is too outlandish.
Yeah, and I think that's what you've got to remember. The price of football is going up. I understand why people want it to be £20. I totally agree, but I think as you've mentioned there, the pricing is agreed between both clubs. We could have asked for it to be 20, but Dunfermline will kind of happily just stump it up to 24 because they'll have seen what we've charged in previous rounds against championship teams, and they're well within their rights to try and cash in from this tie, not just from the TV money, but the ticket money as well.
Yep, absolutely. I don't blame them for wanting to maximise getting a Premiership team this round.
Yeah, well, we'll see what crowd we get for that game, and we'll see what mood we're in, because of course that will be the next game we preview after the weekend's trip to Hibs. So thank you very much to everyone that has tuned into the show tonight. As I said, it's been a busy one, so please remember to like, subscribe as well if you're new to the channel as well. Follow us on your audio platform of choice if you've listened to the show, and as always, if you have listened to the show, because of course this has been streamed live on YouTube, give us your feedback, what it's like listening back to these episodes as well. We're always keen to hear any sort of feedback. The constructive, we'll take that. We'll also take the negatives as well. Me and Phil might take it more personally than Callum, but we're always we're always keen to hear your thoughts on the show and how we can improve things.
I think it's important as well. I think there's comments on Spotify. I was highlighting that to folk the other day. If you're listening on Spotify, you can comment, so do so.
Yeah, do so. Let us know your thoughts. As always, thanks very much for tuning in and sticking with this show, and especially during the dour times, because I know certainly when things aren't going well, it can be hard to relive the torture from the weekend. So until next time, we'll see you then.